Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. I'm Sarah Collins, occupational therapist and homeschool mom. Before we dive in, I want to thank Love Every, the title sponsor of this podcast. Love Every creates research-backed learning tools designed to support early development, and many homeschool families especially appreciate their reading skill sets that help children build strong foundations for literacy through play-based learning. You can learn more about Love Every and their resources in the show notes, and you'll hear more about them later on in the show. Now, if you have ever found yourself wondering why your child cannot get started on a task even when they seem to know exactly what to do, this episode is for you. Today, we're digging into what's really going on when initiation just isn't happening, especially at home, where the lines between support and independence are always shifting. We'll unpack the hidden role of the nervous system in motivation and task initiation, and explore why traditional approaches to getting kids going often backfire with neurodivergent learners. This matters in homeschooling because you are not just managing curriculum, you're shaping how your child feels about learning, about themselves, and about asking for help. Understanding the difference between won't and can't can completely change how you respond in the moment and how your child's confidence grows over time. Now, if you'd like a practical way to apply what we talk about today, be sure to download the free companion guide linked in the show notes. It includes visuals, tools, and printables that you can use right away in your homeschool. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have a clearer perspective on regulation, support, and co-regulation, and how they create the foundations for executive functioning. We'll also talk about practical ways to build those skills in real life while meeting your child exactly where they are now, not where you wish that they would be. Let's get into it. One of the things I hear most often from homeschool parents is this quiet worry. My child is trying so hard, so why does learning still feel like such a struggle? I want to share a quick story from a mom in Virginia who found a solution by working with Learning RX, because I think a lot of you will recognize yourselves in it. She had two daughters, both struggling in different ways. When her older daughter had finished a full brain training program, what stood out wasn't just better reading, spelling, and math, though those did improve too, but the emotional shift. Her frustration dropped, she stopped dreading schoolwork, and for the first time she could work independently for longer stretches without melting down. Then her younger daughter started training, and within just a short time, this mom saw improvements in reading, attention, and memory. But my favorite part, she shared that her daughter was suddenly reading chapter books on her own with no prompting or nagging. I've heard so many amazing testimonies like this from Learning RX clients because this is what they do. They don't teach content, they strengthen the underlying cognitive skills like attention, working memory, and processing speed that make learning feel easier and more rewarding in the first place. Every client is different, and your child may or may not achieve the same results as this family. But if you're homeschooling a child who's bright but distracted, capable but frustrated, or exhausted by daily learning battles, Learning RX might be worth exploring. Their research backed programs help the brain get stronger so that learning doesn't feel like such a fight anymore for kids or parents. So head to learningrx.com/homeschoolot to get special discounted pricing on the cognitive skills assessment and sign up to get additional information and free resources from the Learning RX homeschool support team. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is in. My name is Sarah Collins, occupational therapist and homeschool mom. And today I'm going to share with you Penny Williams, who has a wealth of information on executive functioning, which is one of my very favorite topics, but is going to really dive into one of the questions that I frequently get asked, which is how do we get our kiddos started? So, Penny, before we get started today, can you tell me a little bit who you are, where you came in, how this really became a passion of yours?
Yeah, I have a neurodivergent kid, and that's how I got into this work, right? It wasn't on my radar. And back when he was first diagnosed, his first diagnosis was ADHD and
Mhm.
there really was nothing that was helpful out there. And I just felt like there had to be a different way to parent this kid that was going to be more effective.
Mhm.
And I couldn't figure out what that was for a very long time. And so I became really obsessed with ADHD. Later, we also added the autism diagnosis to
Mhm.
that via he has anxiety. There's so many things going on that all really interplay with each
Yeah.
other. And so after being obsessed for a few years, I finally landed on some things that were making a change for us. And I just wondered why everybody had to start where I started.
Mhm.
Why
Yeah.
did we all have to struggle and figure it out on our own? And so I started writing books and offering parent training and coaching. And so I guess my official title would be behavior and parent coach for neurodiverse families. But there's so much that goes into that. And a lot of it is just support and helping parents know that you're not alone. It's not just you, it's not just your kid. It feels like it. I don't deny that. I've been there. And I imagine if you're homeschooling, you're feeling that even more because you're already a little more physically isolated in what you're doing. And so it's really important to have these conversations and to normalize what is happening for our kids, what is happening for you, what can we do that is going to move the needle and provide some growth, but not break our kids, which traditional parenting really does. Really have to switch that.
Yeah, I love the way that you're talking about that you're not alone in there. And that's one of the things, my slogan here is schooling is not alone schooling, and that there is support out there
Mhm.
for us. We just have to find where to go and who is there. And especially when you're saying, I don't want everyone to start where I did, where you're like, what do I do? How do I help
Yeah,
to love this kiddo, to accept who he is now, right? And
yeah.
also expect that there's going to be changes and growth, but I have to know how to support him along that way to help.
Mhm.
Oh, so good. So, all right, let's dive in a little bit more to once you were doing all of this research, right? And you
Yeah.
were trying to figure out what does help move the needle. Describe a little bit more of what that is. What has helped most for you?
Yeah, the real foundation of it is understanding the nervous system and its role in behavior. Because when we understand that,
Mhm.
now we're seeing behavior as an automatic process that our body takes on to protect us. Whether we need protection in that moment or not is up to us to figure out, or for our kids to figure out in those moments. That system can be really sensitive. And for a lot of neurodivergent kids, it's very sensitive. They get alarms that they are not safe all the time. If you have anxiety, you're getting alarms that you're not safe all the
Right.
time. And often when kids don't know what that is, they're not maybe even aware of those bodily signals. They're not tuned into all of that interoception. Then the
Another
go-to
keyword I love that you're
word,
talking
yes.
about.
And then the body just does something. And
Right.
typically that's the fight, flight, or freeze, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
our nervous system is taking the reins and there is zero intention
Yeah.
in that behavior. So really the crux of behavior is asking yourself, what is the level of intention here? And I talk with so many parents who are resolute that the level of intention is high,
Yeah.
right? And there is zero intention there. But it feels, when that behavior is coming at us, it feels intentional, it feels
Yeah.
manipulative, it feels defiant, right? But it's not in those moments. 99.9% of the time, that is their inner bodyguard and it has just taken over. And I learned to really ask, what is this behavior communicating to me? Ross Greene's book, at the time, The Explosive Child, was what finally made a pivot for us. And that was probably 2.5 years in after diagnosis because my kid wasn't explosive. So I didn't read it at first. And then I
Right.
was
Yeah.
like, why didn't you title this book better? Right. And now he has Raising Human Beings, which is for everyone and really talks about it for everyone. But that was the real start of the turning point. But I didn't even learn about the nervous system until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. My
Yeah.
kid is 23, and I was obsessed and working in this field for a long time before even that. We're talking about it more and more now, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But the nervous system governs how much of our brain is online and available for learning and for executive function. So this ties directly into what we're talking about here in this conversation too.
Yeah, so I love your viewpoint on we have to have these foundations, right? We need to actually be thinking about what is going on within the person, within their brain, within their body, and how it all really comes together. I do, just for those of you who are listening, sometimes I have this bias that everyone has listened to all of my podcasts, and I obviously know that's not true. But we do have podcasts on interoception that I will make sure are linked in the show notes. Also, some on primitive reflexes, which talks a lot about the beginnings of this nervous system development. So I'll make sure that
Awesome.
those are linked as well here before we move on. So if you want to take a break and jump into those, so that you're saying, wait a second, before I figure out a little bit more, let me get more of this background. Those are available and I'll make sure that they are here. But okay, so let's talk a little bit more about function now. Okay, so if we've got the brain and we're saying, but how does this show up in the everyday life? So specifically with our topic today, when parents are like, I know that you know what to do, you just won't start, which actually that really goes back to the intention piece. Do they
Hmm.
know? And talk a
Hmm.
little bit more about that. What is this connection here, and how can we understand whether the statement is actually about motivation or more about the brain?
Yeah, and I think I would back it up even a step further because I think we need to understand what state the nervous system is in before we even think about whether it's a motivation issue or something else. If your
Hmm.
kid is already dysregulated and in fight, flight, or freeze, they have less access to their thinking brain.
Yeah.
If they have access at all to their thinking brain, the thinking brain is responsible for all executive functions.
I was just going to
And
have you define what, when you're saying thinking brain, can you define that a little bit more?
yeah, it's the cognitive part of our brain, that frontal lobe, where rational thought happens, logic, reasoning, but also skills.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, I talk a lot about availability to learn, like this biological availability. And it has to start with the nervous system
Yeah.
because we need the thinking brain fully online and functioning in order to learn. So if our kid is sitting there dysregulated, then already that capacity for learning has really shrunk. So we have to start there. We have
Right.
to start with getting regulated, having them feel pretty good in their body so that their thinking brain is accessible, so that then they can use these executive functions to start doing something, to hold things in their working memory, all of the stuff that it takes to get things done.
And as an OT, you're speaking my language here when we're talking about regulation versus dysregulation.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And I have so many parents who are like, how do you tell that, right? So I'll give my answer, but I want to know, what is your answer when you're saying, what does that look like? What does regulation look like?
Yeah, I think about it in terms of either feeling good in your body,
Mhm.
things feel doable, you feel okay, you feel pleasant,
Yep.
versus feeling out of whack.
Yeah.
That's a simple term that I think most of us can understand. When you just don't feel good, you just don't feel
Mhm.
right. If you think about if you came home from work, you had a really tough day at work, you're totally spent, your brain and your nervous system just wants to chill and be quiet, but you're met at the front door with those kiddos
Oh
and
gosh,
they
yes.
need help with homework and they want to tell you about this new game that they played and all the things, right? Think about how you meet that day versus a day where work went good. How are you coming in the door differently? One, you're regulated, one, you're already dysregulated. You're
Mhm.
already not feeling great. And it affects our thinking, it affects our decision making, our problem solving, how we even, I think, can engage in things, right? If I'm coming in the door and I'm already dysregulated and the world already feels heavy and I just can't, like, I just want to go shut myself in my bedroom, crawl
Right.
under the covers and curl in a ball, right? That's what my body is telling me I need. And I'm able to be aware of that because I've had decades of practice, right? But our kids haven't had that practice
Right.
yet. We have to teach them this. It's not something that we really learn naturally. Here I was in my 40s when I learned about the nervous system and how it
Mhm.
really governs everything in my body.
Yeah. And even you're talking about being in your 40s and understanding and knowing because of decades of practice. But I would even go as far to say is many of us had to suppress what our nervous systems were telling
Mhm.
us for so long because one, two, three eyes on me, it doesn't matter what your body needs right now, you're going to do this.
Yeah.
Or,
And that's still what we
yeah,
do. That's still what
right.
we're doing.
Which is, it can be one of the beautiful things about homeschooling. Simultaneously, we have to recognize you need to understand this so that you do allow this for your child. Because we as homeschoolers could be, asking our children to bring that down or bring that inward just as much as everybody else.
Yeah.
But we do have that opportunity more so when we're not trying to have 30 kids do the same thing, right?
Hmm.
So
You have
it
the
can,
opportunity to do it
right.
differently,
Yes,
right?
yes, for sure. And that can be a really beautiful thing. I love to say we get to look at our kids and be a student of our student. So we can
Mhm.
say, I'm noticing that your shoulders are scrunched up. I'm noticing that your eyebrows are really into. I'm noticing that you haven't eaten in a while. So we can help
Yeah.
to give some language for that interoception piece to
Mhm.
try to have our kids learn to advocate for themselves and to understand really what's going on. But yes, all of these things would very much lead into no, you can't get started because you're not even online right now. Your thinking brain
Mhm.
is not online right now.
Yeah. And we can build habits that support
Mhm.
this. I tell parents all the time, build in a regulation activity before you're asking your kid to do something that is going to take some mental bandwidth.
Yeah.
If it's getting ready in the morning, if it's sitting down to homework, sitting down to schoolwork, before the bedtime routine, before maybe you're going to go to grandma's house and you're hoping for a little bit calmer behavior or something,
Right.
right? Build it in and make it part of the routine. So when they grow up, it's still part of their routine. I'm
Mhm.
still trying to teach myself to do things for myself. If we had done that as kids, honestly, I think the whole world would be a different place, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's my own soapbox. But we can build it in. We can
Mhm.
build it in.
So I think this is a perfect time for a break to hear more from our sponsors. And when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about what that can look like. What does this building it in before mean? You guys, learning to read is not just about letters and sounds. From an occupational therapy lens, it also involves attention, motor coordination, visual processing, sensory regulation, and language working together. See, it's not a simple task. So, we also need the right tools to help us to support our kids. The Love Every Reading skill set supports the whole child through hands-on materials that encourage fine motor development for writing readiness, visual discrimination for recognizing patterns and symbols, language-rich interactions that support comprehension. The activities are designed to be interactive and meaningful, helping children actively engage their bodies and brains in the learning process. and parents are guided through what to offer and when, because goodness gracious, we do not need to be more overwhelmed. This helps us because we don't need to design or piece together instruction on our own, but we have the right tools to support our kids. So explore the reading skill set at loveevery.com. Now, back to the show. Welcome back. So Penny was just chatting with us about building in activities throughout the day that can really help to make sure that thinking brain is online. So Penny, talk a little bit more about what that could look like.
There's so many different options. And as you know, as an OT, it depends on the sensory profile. It depends on the kid, what's going to work for them. But there are a few things that have been studied and researched and proven to activate the vagus nerve, which is what actually soothes our nervous system. Things like splashing cold water on your face. For kids who don't like water on their face, an ice pack on their cheek or neck will do pretty much the same thing, or cold water on the wrist. I, as a woman of a certain age, find myself putting cold water on my wrist a lot because it helps, right?
That's
It
funny. I've
helps to
never tried
chill
that.
out the body.
Yeah.
And so that is something that works great in the mornings. Have your kids, first thing they do, splash some water on their face or go get their special calm down ice pack and put it on their cheek and maybe listen to some music or something. Gargling or anything that vibrates the throat. So humming, gargling, singing, sucking thick liquid through a straw. Could you in the morning serve your kid a thick smoothie with the straw for breakfast? You're helping them regulate at the same time as feeding them, right? So we can really dovetail a lot of these things. One thing that one of my podcast guests had taught me was to take a little, like just take a regular straw that you would get at a fast food restaurant or anything and just cut a little, I don't know, what is that, 3 inches maybe, and keep it in your pocket. And when you feel yourself getting dysregulated, you can blow really hard through the straw or suck really hard through the straw. And it's pursing those muscles in your face, which helps to activate the vagus nerve. Things like that can be universally helpful if a kid isn't already so dysregulated that they can't engage in the activity, right? There's a caveat there, of course. We're not telling them to breathe when they're already really struggling, right? We're wanting to make these part of their daily sort of rhythm so that they can continue that for themselves later on. And then the stuff that just depends on the kid. Could it be therapy putty? Could it be music? Could it be going for a walk, counting backwards from 10, reciting the alphabet, sand tray, or a bucket of beans or rice? Lots of OT activities are regulating. So if your kid is in OT, what are you doing there? What is the OT doing with them? A lot of those things would probably be useful. My son made cloud dough with his OT once, and then he was obsessed with cloud dough forever, and he would run his cars through it and smush it through his fingers because he found that soothing. What is it that your kid finds soothing? And it could be quiet, could be being left alone as well. If you have like a sensory seeker who needs proprioceptive input, then you're looking at getting that body moving, maybe doing wall pushes, maybe walking around with a weighted blanket on their back or something. Like, how do we get them some heavy work? All of these things can be done before you do anything else. Before you do homework, you could have them jump on the trampoline. You could go for a walk together. If you go for a walk together, you're also putting connection into the mix, and connection is what regulates us. You can pile them on, you can multi-layer and really get a big bang for your buck, right? For teenagers, I think it's whatever they're willing to do, but it has to be their idea. So you really have to go
Yes.
about it in a little different way, right?
Especially if we're talking about task initiation, right? There's a lot of parents who will come to me and say things like, I can tell that my child is dysregulated or my teenager or whatever. I can tell by their body language, I can tell by their voice and what they're saying, but if I say, oh, I can tell this, why don't you go outside and jump on the trampoline? No, is the first
Mm-hmm.
answer. No.
Yep.
Because again, that then brings back in you are in a state of dysregulation and we're asking you to take this activity that I'm telling you to do and get started with it and persist through. It's another transition or another activity that you have to initiate. So
Yeah,
you
and
could
it's
really
adding
struggle.
to the overwhelm, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're already dysregulated, that access to the thinking brain has already dimmed, and then we are adding a task and language and all of these things on
Hmm.
top of it. So, of course, their nervous system is going to say,
Yeah.
no, I can't
Yeah.
take anything else right now. So, suggesting an activity when a kid is already dysregulated is almost always going to fail.
So then
It's
parents are
just
say,
not the
so what do I
time.
do? So what do I
Yeah,
do
yeah.
then?
So you then offer co-regulation, right? You start taking a deep breath. You start, I'm going to go for a walk around the block. You want to go with me? I'm going to sit down and pet the dog. I bet he would love it if you would show him some attention too, if you would pet him too. I'm going to go in the bathroom and splash some cold water on my face because I'm just not feeling all together right now.
For my son, it was I would just literally myself start doing push-ups because that
Mm-hmm.
was something that really made a difference for him. And at the beginning, it was so almost shocking to him
Yeah.
to watch me just randomly break out into push-ups.
To
After a
break
while,
that
he got,
loop, right?
yeah, after a while, he got used to that. He's like, oh, mom again. But so then it caused like a laugh or a disruption at the,
Hmm.
and then he would jump in with me. But it also was me modeling because I needed this and I needed to
Yeah.
keep my own nervous system calm to then also allow him to co-regulate with me.
Yeah. And don't expect that they're going to join right in. That
Mhm.
would be great.
Yeah,
In
if
an
everything,
ideal
it's
world,
like
that's
Simon Says.
wonderful.
Right.
But expecting that is going to be a big letdown for
Yeah.
you. The goal is to just put that calming energy into the room for
Mhm.
them to anchor to and to give their brain the suggestive
Mhm.
information that maybe we need to switch things up, or
Yeah.
maybe there's something I could do that might help me feel a little better at this moment. But they're not necessarily going to immediately join in with you.
Yes.
And I just think about joining hands around a bonfire and singing Kumbaya or something. It's just not,
This works every time. I don't know what you're talking
the
about.
unicorns are not going to start
Right.
flying, but eventually we're going to see changes.
Yeah.
That energy that we are offering is information to our kids' nervous system. And it tells them you are safe. You're giving those cues of safety. And that's what the nervous system needs to regulate and to settle. And that's so important. So if you're getting frustrated with your kid about doing schoolwork and you're starting to change your tone of voice or get a little more stern or what, you're actually sending them into dysregulation. And so they're really not going to be able to do it, right? So thinking about how am I showing up in this room? What energy am I putting out? What am I giving my kid to co-regulate to? And then for teens, can I come about it in this backdoor way where it becomes their idea? How do I get their engagement as well?
Now, what about the parents who are saying, sure, this is all well and great if I have this time and I can sit with them and whatever, but that's not the way that the world works. Because I do get a lot of questions that come right
Yeah.
from there. Their boss isn't going to care, how
Uh-huh.
they feel, and someone down the street doesn't care if I'm telling them they don't feel regulated right now. How do we talk to these parents, or what would you say to them to support their kid?
Yeah. Supporting your 9-year-old right
Mhm.
now does not mean that they're going to need support when they're 30, at least not that same support.
What about our
We
17-year-olds? They may need it very quickly. They might be
Yes,
rolling out into the
yes,
world.
yes, but they're not right now. Like when we are so worried about that future,
Yeah.
we are dysregulated. It comes back again and again to regulation and what we are feeding them. If
Mhm.
I'm really freaking out because my kid's boss is not going to sit with them to do their work, how am I showing up? What information am I giving their nervous system? I'm probably helping them to freak out more or
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
not be able to get started or to focus. Part of self-care for me is to really work on our own thought processes around our kids' future. We have to put a lid on future casting because we are handicapping ourselves in the here and now for creating the skills and the regulation and all those things that are actually going to help them succeed then, right?
I think this might be the most beautiful thing I've heard of this podcast in a very long time. Just this
Aw.
concept of let's really focus on the here and now, because that future casting can be inhibiting your here and now. And that gives so much freedom to us as parents of,
Yeah.
sure, we do there. Yes, we have to expect that there is going to be change for sure. And that I say that all the time. But that also comes with dwelling on the right now of accepting of who you are right now. We can't have expectance without acceptance, and we can't have
Mhm.
acceptance without expectancy. Both go
Yeah.
back and forth.
And we're never talking about giving up or
Hmm.
giving in. We're talking about sliding a timeline
Yeah.
and supporting where a kid is right now. If I support my even 17-year-old with
Yeah.
getting their work done on a day where they're struggling, that is going to change the future
Hmm.
for them. And it's not going to be that they need somebody to sit with them forever.
Ever.
We're doing it now because it's what's needed now to be able to not need it in the
Mhm.
future.
Yeah.
So we're not lowering expectations forever. If you're like my kid struggled to tie his shoes for the longest time. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to be wearing Velcro shoes when he walks across the stage at graduation from high school. This is what I thought.
Yeah.
And I perseverated on it. I got upset about it, right?
Yeah.
He learned to tie his shoes. And he actually had a drive-through graduation in COVID, so he
Oh,
didn't even
gosh.
walk across the stage. So, like, none
Definitely
of the
not what you could have
things.
predicted, right?
Right, exactly. Like, how do we know
Yeah.
way early on? But support gives kids the confidence to keep trying. If we don't support them, then they feel incapable.
Hmm.
My own kid, who is 23 now, he graduated from high school, even though he has a high IQ, is brilliant, thinking that he is useless and incapable and there is no place for him. And despite having me as an
Yeah.
informed, advocating parent, because there was so much misunderstanding about the role of intelligence and capability. And intelligence isn't the only thing that dictates what kind of output you can create in
Hmm.
education at school. And so we've spent years undoing that because he didn't feel like anybody really saw him and he didn't feel supported. Now he tells everybody he meets that he has the best mom in the world because he felt supported from me. And that I think is everything to me.
Yeah.
He's 23. He hasn't gone to college. It is not in the near future. He's working things out. He's living at home. We're
Hmm.
building skills still. And a lot of parents would say, I failed. But my kid has a good heart. He
Yeah.
cares about other people. And he thinks that I am in his corner and I'm always going to fight for him. And that's what matters to
That's
me. The other stuff will come. But if he doesn't have that, if he doesn't feel that anybody believes in him
it.
and sees the struggle and supports the struggle, he will give up. He
Right.
will not be able to keep growing and get to the place where he is independent.
Yeah.
He's fully capable of being independent. He wants to be independent. It's just taking a longer time to get
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
But part of that was the messaging that he received throughout his school
Right.
career.
Yeah.
So we really have to think about how much we are supporting a sense of purpose
Yeah.
and belonging and really helping them feel seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
mental health piece matters for all the rest of it.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me back to, if all we're thinking about is, wow, I really need my kid to get started in this activity or whatever, how if we're really hyper focused on that, we may be really missing the piece or a
Mhm.
piece of the puzzle. But yet, if we are building this foundation with our kiddos, and I'm not saying if A, then B for sure, but most likely, as we are providing that safety and we are providing that seen, I see you, I know you, I understand you, that some of this thinking brain can then begin to come online and we can develop those task initiation and persistence and all of those skills
Yeah.
well. So they're
If you
very
feel
enabling.
seen, then you feel connected. right? You feel
Yeah,
some connection
for
if you
sure.
feel seen, if you feel like people are hearing you and understanding what you're going through. That's regulating.
Yeah,
It all keeps tying back to that nervous system
yeah.
because it really is the cockpit of action. And so, yeah, I think that really helping our kids feel like they are loved and supported and understood. Just think about, you used the notice language earlier,
Mhm.
which I love. It's so good for everyone, but
Yeah.
especially for neurodivergent kids. You could sit down next to them when they're struggling to get started with their work and say, I notice you're having a really hard time right now.
Mhm.
Is there something I can do to help? What do you need?
And
Or just, I'm here.
there you go. And
I'm
that
here.
awareness, right? That even if we're providing it, that awareness then can lead to some self-advocacy for
Hmm.
sure. Penny, thank you so much for being here and for sharing so much knowledge with us. Can you tell others how they can find you or hear more about your books and your podcasts and all of that as well?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is to go to parentingadhdandautism.com. Everything is linked up there. The podcast is called Beautifully Complex. You can listen to it anywhere that you get your podcasts. I just recorded episode 351, I think. So
Yeah.
there's a huge library of help there for parenting neurodivergent kiddos, and lots on educating as well and teaching. And then, of course, my books are linked up, coaching, courses, all of that good stuff is all there. Social media, all
Yeah.
the things.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
As we wrap up today's episode, I want to come back to why this conversation matters for real homeschool days. Understanding the role of regulation, the nervous system, and executive functioning is incredibly powerful. But the real challenge is applying the understanding in the moment when the day is not going as planned, emotions are high, and you're trying to figure out what your child actually needs in order to move forward. If you want help putting these ideas into practice, I've created a companion guide for this episode. Inside the guide, you will find visuals, simple tools, and printable resources that can help you to support working memory, initiation, and follow through in your homeschool day. You can download that guide in the show notes. And if you find yourself thinking, I understand these concepts, these ideas, but I'd love more personalized help applying them in my homeschool, coaching is also available. Coaching gives you the opportunity to work through your real situations together so we can find strategies that actually fit into your homeschool. You'll find information about both the companion guide and coaching in the show notes and at homeschoolot.com. Remember, you are not alone in this because the OT is always in. Thanks for being here.